The Brazilian president wants to change the next election process back to paper vote. He has alleged that fraud in previous election without giving evidence, and last week he threatened to cancel next election next year if there is not a clean one. So what is the administration response to these claims, and does the U.S. have confidence that the previous past elections in Brazil were fair and the next one will also be fair?
What we call for, and this is not unique to Brazil, but it's what we call for around the world, are free and fair elections, the ability of the people to exercise their will freely and fairly. And so the mechanics of an election are typically not of consequence to us. What is of consequence is the character of an election. And so we will be looking to see to it that elections around the world, but including in Brazil, are free and fair.
To these claims that the president is making, he's following Trump's playbook when it comes to election fraud.
Well, I would not want to characterize what the Brazilian president is saying, but I will characterize where we stand on the exercise of democracy, the ability of peoples around the world to exercise their free will, and that's free and fair elections, in our view, are important. They are important in democracies. They are important in aspiring democracies. They are a key metric as we determine the health of democracies and the health of participatory electoral systems around the world.
And another one, because harassment against journalists also in Brazil has increased since President Bolsonaro took office. Last week, the organization Reporters Without Borders included Bolsonaro on a list of press predators, alongside with 37 authoritarian leaders like Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin. And also last week, President's lawyers sent a message to a female reporter saying that in China she would disappear and her body would not be found. So what is this kind of threat is something that worries this administration that coming from Bolsonaro's government?
Well, generally, the department is always concerned when journalists face threats of harassment, face threats of intimidation, and especially when there are threats of violence. We already spoke of one especially tragic case during the course of this briefing. Freedom of the press, freedom of expression more broadly, is something we support around the world. In order to have freedom of the press, freedom of expression, you have to stand up for the safety and security of journalists and reporters around the world. So I haven't taken a close look at the study you mentioned, but we certainly have seen, broadly speaking, an uptick in threats of intimidation, threats of violence of reporters globally. As you know, the Secretary, just in advance of World Press Freedom Day in May of this year, hosted a group of journalists, many of whom have faced intimidation, threats of violence in their own work. And we did that very purposefully to put a spotlight on this challenge. And it's a challenge that not only comes from governments, sometimes non-governmental organizations and actors, terrorist groups and others take part in this, but journalists should never face threats, face danger in the course of their work for what it is they may report, for what it is they may uncover.
Could these violations of human rights impact the bilateral relationship between Brazil and the U.S., since you were saying this administration put human rights at the center of foreign policy?
Well, that's exactly the point. And it's not unique to Brazil. It's not unique to any one country. But in every relationship we have, this includes with our closest partners. It includes those with whom we may have profound disagreements. We are always going to be taking a close look at a country's human rights record to seek improvement where we can, but ultimately to see to it that people around the world are protected in exercising their universal rights, their universal freedoms. The United States will always be a voice for that. Oftentimes we do make that point publicly, but in private conversations as well, we don't shy away, and we do what we can in our assessment as in the means most effective for us to protect and to safeguard human rights around the world.
Just can I do a very quick follow-up on Cuba?